and happy Monday. Super excited to dive right into this topic today. This is the series number 2 in Hilmon's Sori's school performance event. We have 2 more coming up that I'm super excited to talk more about after this event. But before we dive in, I am super excited to start this event, but I would love to start things off with a fun icebreaker as folks trickle in. So, Hilmon, what was the song that kind of kept you going this week? I always love to ask our guests this question.
The song that kept me going this week. Well, I'll tell you this. So I have been, and apparently I'm not the only person in the world doing this. So I'm like kind of new to TikTok, and I've been TikToking and swiping, and I go there for like pure joy. There's like no education there for me. There's no like newsy stuff. There's no like polarity thing going on, but I keep discovering all this new music and these new dances, which if anybody's curious, hang out after the session and, just kidding. But I don't know necessarily the names of these songs, but I listen to them and then I hop over to iTunes because I'm old and I don't use Spotify. And that's where I go for it. Hey, speaking of old, Angelica, not to take too much time for this, but this is a very sad day. I don't know if you can see that I've got like a little stubble. I've had a busy weekend and I don't usually grow this thing out. I hesitate to call it a beard because this is about as far as it gets. It could go like 20 years and it wouldn't get more than this. But I noticed a gray hair.
Oh,
It's over.
no.
My youth is
No.
gone. My youthful innocence is completely gone,
Hey,
such as it existed.
the silver fox look is a thing now.
Fox.
Um,
I don't know if I got the Fox thing happening, but silver, yes, I've got that. Thank you, though. I appreciate it.
and to your TikTok point, I get all my music from TikTok as well. They always have really great music, and it's such a short clip that when you hear it and you're like, wow, that sounds good, I usually run to Spotify as well and get a lot of my new music from TikTok.
That's
Thank
it.
you. Yeah, it's really innovated, and I spend a little bit too much on TikTok, more than I should, but it's nice to hear that other folks are on it as well, because you do hear a lot of new news and all these like upcoming things, and
We'll say
sometimes
news.
yes, yes. My friends have a joke. Every time I bring up like a fact or a news or anything, they're like, "You got that from TikTok, didn't you? Who's your source? Is it the source of TikTok?" I'm like, maybe it's an
Maybe it's no
article
less
TikTok.
credible. Yeah. Who cares that
um,
it was an 11-year-old in Omaha, Nebraska? It's
I
still
know.
news. Yeah, that's great.
It's funny. Well, thank you everyone for joining in. I put a question in the chat. I love to know where everyone is calling in from. Also, if you have a song that kept you going throughout the week, I know it's just Monday and we're starting off. I also love to know that too. Both Hilmon and I want to hear more recommendations for songs that everyone is listening to.
Definitely.
So now let's get started. This event is brought to you by the team at Modern Sales Pros. So for those of you who are not familiar, hello, my name is Angelica. I am one of the community event managers at MSP. And Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer questions they struggle to solve on their own and help them to see around corners they may not know about. We do this through online sessions like the one you're at today, our online robust forum, and our quarterly summits. So if you're not already part of the MSP squad, you'll be invited to join after the event. Next, I'd love to introduce our sponsor for today. We actually have 2 sponsors, which Hilmon Sori is the co-founder and managing director of Closed Loop. Closed Loop is a revenue strategy firm. They drive performance for management, sales, and customer service and enablement in the fastest growing companies in the world. I'm actually going to drop a link in the chat to learn more about Closed Loop. And he is also founding Coach CRM. Coach CRM is the coaching results management platform that leverages technology to drive the rep to manager communication, proven to move the needle on performance, professional development, and revenue. I'm also going to be dropping the link here. So definitely check them out and learn more about Closed Loop and Coach CRM. Next, before I pass it off to Hilmon to introduce himself, I'm going to do some quick housekeeping notes. So this event is going to be recorded, and please use the Q&A function at the top right-hand corner, or even drop your questions in the chat. We have Hilmon for an hour, so definitely take advantage of his knowledge and expertise. And if you have any friends or colleagues that couldn't make it, don't worry, the event is going to be recorded, and the key takeaways will be made available on the MSP website. Now, enough about me and MSP. I'm going to pass it off to our speaker today, the one and only Hilmon Sori, to talk a little bit about himself and then drive straight into the content. Hilmon, after you.
You know, it's funny. I'm actually not the one and only. I have to call that out. I'm actually the third. So I'm the one and thirdly. How's that?
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. I stopped that short at my son, though. There's no Hilmon the fourth, unless he decides to do so. But I actually liked your introduction. I want to hop into the meat of it. I'm Hilmon Sori. I'm the co-founder of and managing director at Closed Loop, co-founder of Coach CRM as well. You can dig into the websites to learn more about both of those companies. But today we're going to actually talk a little bit more on the side of Closed Loop, where we do sales management consulting and we work on things called sales effectiveness assessments. And I hadn't listened before, maybe Angelica, where when you do the introduction of MSP, you talk about how the goal is to allow members to solve problems on their own. So that ties really well to what we're talking about today. This is something that we do. It's a process that we use with our clients, and we've got teams of analysts and consultants and coaches on our teams and trainers, excuse me, and trainers on our team that work with our clients to be able to do these types of things in engagements. But there's absolutely zero reason why anybody in a sales leadership role, a sales management role, can't take some of these key concepts that we'll be talking about and go back to your own organization to apply these things. And that's the goal. What we do at Closed Loop is we open source just about everything that we do. Corey Bray is my co-founder. Some of you may know him. We've written 8 books together, and the goal of that is, one, to kind of get our frameworks out so that we can clearly and coherently articulate them to people and ensure that they're refined and proven, and also so that you're able to use them in your own organizations and you don't have to go hire a firm to do so. So let's dive in. Am I kicking this thing off over here?
I'm kicking it off for you.
You're on it.
There you go.
Angelica, producer. Thank you, ma'am. So first, let's just start with last time we did Sales Performance School, we were talking about coaching. And the goal there was to give you some techniques, give you some clear insight into methodologies that could be used to be able to coach the player and not coach the play. And what we meant by that was really, how do we get managers out of the weeds of just listening to call recordings or just digging through CRM or just working through things like conversion metrics, and actually using coaching as a lever that enables you to create a greater expansive impact on your entire team, starting with individuals and leveraging that up into that whole rising tide floating all boats for the organization. So that was the last session. If you missed it, I think it exists somewhere in posterity as an archive on the MSP site. Angelica can probably let you know where that was. But for Sales Performance School number 2, we're talking about this 4S system for sales enablement excellence. And I want to be sure to articulate out of the gate that this is not just for sales enablement professionals. We're talking about sales enablement as an ecosystem, sales enablement as a concept that specifically is focused on how you get every element of your organization having a prospect-centric mindset with respect to the work that they're doing. This could be legal, this could be CFO, this could be COO, this could be success, it could be marketing, it could be sales, it could be product, the list goes on. The idea is, how do you leverage this system to be able to, in a very agile way, create a means by which your organization can develop what we call sales enablement excellence? So let's dig into that a little bit. First off, imagine a world, right? This may not be difficult to imagine because I think we're living in it right now, but imagine a world where you as a sales leader are in a situation where you're tightening belts, right? You may have heard that budgets are cut back. Maybe you're hearing that we're freezing budgets. Maybe you're hearing that we've got to scale back on some of the things that we're doing and be able to do more with less. Some of you might have experienced layoffs, or you might be anticipating layoffs coming down the pipe. You've probably got a team that is some combination of remote and on-site, maybe hybrid teams that you're working with, and trying to leverage that, maintain the motivation of the organization, maintain consistency throughout the organization, maintain sales impact. Some of you might be in a fortunate position where you're actually still onboarding new hires and taking advantage of this huge this huge ocean on the marketplace of fantastic salespeople who may have been displaced from their roles, and you're taking an opportunity now because you're in position to do so, to bring those people into your organization, but you've still got an eye towards growth. Maybe you're venture funded and you've got that hockey stick that you've got to hit. And ultimately, if you're a sales leader, your focus is on revenue. Even if none of these specific things are happening to you, you're dealing with the challenges that are external to your organization, which are all the things that we're hearing in the news and all the things that we're dealing with respect to recession, not recession, inflation, challenges with delivery and logistics, and the list goes on and on and on. So we're sitting in this world right now where, as a sales leader, it can be a little bit daunting, to say the least, with respect to what are the metrics, what are the things that you're going to be able to drive from your perch, what are the things that you should be looking at and the levers that you can pull to be able to ensure that you're doing your best to ensure that your organization is going to be successful, and that the people who are your charge, these individuals that are in sales roles, are actually teed up for success as well. So we often get brought into organizations with an eye towards, hey, things have shifted, and either we're worried that we're not tracking our directional indication, our leading indicators show that we may not be headed in the right direction right now. And we know that it's time, if not for a pivot, it's time for us to do something a little bit differently. We also get brought into organizations that are scaling quickly. And sometimes it feels like you're holding on to the reins and the horses are just going, and you're being driven by the growth instead of being able to have the reins and have control and be able to architect that growth. These are the spaces where Closed Loop as an organization often comes in. And I want to just impart the way we go about dealing with these and the way we go about having these conversations with organizations. And one thing to keep in mind is we're going to talk about this 4S strategy, which is the name of this specific webinar. And it comes from McKinsey's system, which is 7 S's. And those 7 S's are strategy, structure, system, staffing, skills, style, and shared values. We cut off a couple of those because we're typically working with orgs that don't have 18 to 24 months to do a seismic shift and to turn a giant ship. Instead, we're working with organizations that within 90 to 180 days need to be able to not just demonstrate an impact, but actually have that impact their bottom line. And so we're talking about how we do this in an agile way, in a swift way. So I want you to keep in mind as we go through the ins and outs of this 4S program that we're not talking about boiling the ocean. We're talking about how do we, in an agile way, do an overview of our org to identify what is the low-hanging fruit that gives us the highest value opportunity to be able to make a significant impact directionally that's going to change the tide of our organization. So the 4 S's that we focus on in building the ultimate sales enablement program across your org are strategy, systems, staff, and skills. So we cut out a couple of those that McKinsey likes to focus on because they're more global. Some of them are a little bit more altruistic when you start talking about shared values and things like that. These are not to say that they're not important. They're just not necessarily relevant to the specific division of sales in the way that we look at it through that lens. So let's dig into how we talk about these. I want to frame up each from our lens, how we look at them. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about some key questions that you could be asking yourself or your team with respect to how you can continue to drive growth, irrespective of what the economy looks like, irrespective of what challenges or changes might be taking place inside your own organization. One quick thing, when I'm attending webinars, often I have a question and I don't want to wait. Total type A personality here. I don't like waiting until the last 15 minutes to ask my question. So I don't want to make you wait. If you have a question, type it into the chat. Angelica is all over it. She will interrupt me. I'm not looking at the chat. I'm just focused on y'all. But she'll interrupt me and make sure that your question gets answered. Feel free. There's no formality to this whatsoever. I want you to get what you came for out of this conversation. All right. So when we talk about strategy, At a high level, what we do when we go into an organization is we want to evaluate a number of things. The first thing is if we have real clarity with respect to competition. I know you're sitting there thinking like, yeah, okay, duh, Hilmon, we're a sales organization. We clearly know who our competition is. We know who we're going up against. We know what they talk about. But what we really want to do here is be able to box the competition in. And this is, again, this is sales enablement, right? So everything that we're doing here is all specific to how we enable a salesperson to be more effective and to sell more, how we're able to make a greater impact on that patch that we really should be impacting. So we look at competition through two lenses. One is direct competition. Direct competition are those people who purport to do the same thing you do. I say purport because I know I'm talking to sales professionals who are sitting there thinking, well, Acme claims that they do what we do, but we actually do it much better. Not what I want to hear. What I'm saying are, if I were a customer, if I were a prospect, and I heard the pitch from each of you, or I was looking at the marketing from each of you, would I be able to very readily and easily understand the differentiation? Or am I thinking that you're playing in the same space, right? That's what we're going to call direct competition. Really important that we know who that is. Then there's indirect competition. Indirect competition are the things that might be competing for dollars. They might be the things that we have to rip and replace internally. They might be legacy systems that aren't nearly as disruptive and swifter, faster, stronger, and better like we are, but they're in a position where they have leverage in the conversation, and we actually have to deal with that leverage to be able to sell, even though they may not be apples to apples in the same category as us. Now, what do we do with that once we've identified that? Once we understand competitively where we fit, the onus is on us to do this thing, which is finding out where our winning zone is. And here's why it's important. The winning zone is as simple as this. There's a losing zone, which is that place where you have to clearly understand that there is a competitor who does what you do for a specific customer better than you do. Maybe they have more integrations. Maybe they have a deeper level of expertise. Maybe they have more features and benefits that are great for a certain market segment that is not really your jam. And so you're going to cede that to them, because if you have your salespeople selling to those organizations or trying to sell to those organizations, it's going to be a slow slog of wasted resources that are actually going to end up with your competition anyway. We don't want to spend time there, right? Then you've got the battlefield. This is standard battle card stuff, right? The battlefield is that place where you've got feature or service parity. Pretty much the same. This is not where you want to have conversations, because if you're talking about all of the same types of products and services and features and benefits and all of these types of things, it's going to be a quick race to the bottom from the standpoint of economics, right? If Angelica is selling the same thing that Hilmon is selling, then why not just go for who's cheaper? And how much loyalty are you going to have? Probably not so much, right? Then there's this place that's the winning zone. And the winning zone is really important because this is why your product roadmap exists. If you happen to be a service-based business, this is why you created the service and where you're leaning on your expertise of your organization. And this is where you should be selling. So the goal here is to make sure that that total addressable market is both known, realized, and sizable enough for you to be selling. Now, I know there are folks who are sitting there thinking, nodding your heads, going, yeah, okay, we've got that in spades. What's important right now with respect to strategy is to ensure that someone hasn't moved your cheese. Is your winning zone the same winning zone that it was 6 months ago? Is it the same winning zone that it was 18 months ago? Is it the same winning zone that it was pre-COVID? And if not, have you made the shifts necessary? And when I say the shifts necessary, I mean clear and vocal shifts to your sales team, clear and vocal shifts to marketing and to your strategy, and understanding what product is doing relative to the roadmap to ensure that you are meeting the demands of your winning zone. Sometimes this isn't even product. Sometimes it's just messaging. We've worked with organizations before who might have a multi-layered product that's got different benefits, different levels that they might be able to sell to. And they've been focusing on one, but then when a market shift occurs, they realize, wow, we really should be talking about this other thing because this is the problem we're solving right now. And this problem actually has more value than it had 18 months ago. I'll give you an example of a company that we worked with. They were in construction tech. One of the things that their product did was they were able to ingest documents, myriad documents, whether they're PDFs or they're spreadsheets, et cetera, and reflect them back in a mobile format, which would allow people to not have to come back to their mobile office, to the trailer, to get information, which actually optimized productivity and efficiency for the organization. That was a small subset of what they did. What they really do, which was a much bigger marketplace, was integrate with all of these other much larger construction technologies, right? Well, when COVID happened, it became much more important to keep people out on the job site and not in the trailer and not traipsing and commingling with one another than it ever had before. So just a quick message market quick message market fit pivot, say that 10 times fast, allowed for this organization to generate significantly more top of funnel activity and actually penetrate a vertical market that they had not been in before. So understanding strategic
Oh, looks like we lost Hilmon. Technical difficulties as this happens during live events. Thank you for your patience as we try to get Hilmon back on stage. 1 second, we will try. We lost the feed. Yeah, so we lost Hilmon. Well, let me just message him to see where he's at in terms of trying to get back on stage. But this is, we're running into some technical difficulties, so please bear with us. And we're back.
My whole building's Wi-Fi just dropped, so
Oh,
now I'm on a hotspot. At any rate, I am so sorry. Not sure
the
what that's
be
about.
the beauty of live events, Hilman. No worries.
I'm telling
Everyone
you.
everyone was very patient. There's some questions being asked to wait till you get back, but everyone is engaged and ready to kick things off if you're ready.
Let's throw out those questions. And I am actually unable to switch the slides, so I'm going to defer to you on slide switching. I'm not sure what happened there. I apologize
Yeah.
again. What are the questions we've got?
Yeah, so far, so while you were away, while we were trying to get sorted into technical difficulties, we were trying to discuss the key takeaways till then. So number one, find your winning zone. Number two, escape your losing zone. What else? Just to get a refresher as we,
Yeah, so really, really important here. The one huge takeaway I want you to understand is not just finding the winning zone from the standpoint of the product. You've got to find that winning zone relative to the message market fit, meaning sometimes engineering and the geniuses over in product have come up with something that should be competitively different than what exists in the marketplace. And that's why we have disruptive software, et cetera. The onus on sales is to ensure that we're articulating that to the marketplace in a way that they're going to opt into a conversation. So it is not enough. And if you're early days, if you're in a startup and you've worked on product market fit, that's fantastic. If you don't have message market fit, you're not going to have anybody to talk to. So focus on the message, and you understand message market fit to the extent that you get top of funnel conversion by saying, here are the problems that we're solving for folks like you, et cetera, et cetera. That's where you really want to live.
amazing. We also have a video Q&A from Alicia. Alicia, if you're ready,
Oh,
I can approve you if you want to join. We sent the invite if you want to join on stage with us and ask your question to Hilmon.
very cool. Hey,
Very
Alicia.
cool. Oh, okay. If you're not comfortable, if you don't want to, if that was just an accident, feel free to hop back as an audience member. But folks, if you do want to ask your questions, feel free to do that in the Q&A function. If you want to do a video chat, by all means, you can also do that as well. We can also leave that towards the end, as I know Hilmon wants to kick things off with the presentation.
Okay. Can you click on slide 5? I'm paralyzed. Can't click the slides
Oh,
now.
yes, absolutely.
All right. So key outcomes to drive growth. Are you seeing it?
Yep.
Oh, I'm not seeing it. Okay. This is
Oh,
just me then. Okay, so key outcomes to drive growth. Here are some really important pieces that I'm going to do from memory because I don't get to see the slide. Number one, try to understand really clearly if you're aligned to your ICP, right? Your ideal customer profile. To what extent have you done the investigation necessary today to ensure that that ideal customer profile is still lining up with your target market vis-a-vis all the challenges that might be happening in the economy? Another piece here is ensuring that your salespeople understand the job to be done for every persona that you're selling to. So job to be done, I think I've abbreviated it here, JTBD, job to be done. Yeah, that's right. This is one of the questions that we get all the time is how do we get our sellers just being business people, able to actually talk to our prospects in a way where we're not just slinging software. We're not just talking about what we do and how we sell and how we're better and how we can solve problems for them, but really able to have a trusted advisor relationship with the prospect that we're talking to in each persona, and being able to leverage that relationship in a way where a prospect feels as though the person that they're talking to clearly understands their business and clearly understands the challenges that they have and that they're facing every day, and then is able to relate how your product or service solves for those things. And then there are a couple other pieces here. Can you read off the last two for me, Angelica?
yes. How are you tying pain points to evidence? Use case, case study, question mark. What market shifts are
Yeah.
testing assumptions?
Yeah, so we talked about the market shifts. Just ensure that you're aligned with those market shifts. And then as the market shifts, people become skeptical. Right now, if I were to say to you, hey, I can sell you some software, all of you would be sitting there going, yeah, I got tight budgets. I got people looking over my head. I've just had to lay off a percentage of my sales force, or else I've got these numbers that I got to hit. Not so sure now's the time, Hilmon. If I'm able to reflect to you, however, in use case form, not just in my language and narrative, but in use case form, how I've driven numbers for folks specifically like you in your industry struggling with your challenge, then that gives audience. That allows me to have a conversation that is a selling conversation that actually has some credibility. So lean heavily in challenging economic times on things like case studies and things like white papers and things that evidence, and it can be tight, right? This can be micro studies. It doesn't mean you have to go, spin up a 40-page case study, but just get data to support your claims, and that's going to go a long way towards conversion. Let's talk systems, shall we? Next slide.
Next slide.
Thank you. So systems, there are three pieces here. I hope you guys will forgive me. I'm doing this all from memory.
You're doing good. You're doing great.
Well, it's my stuff. I better, right? You're just doing this to me purposely because I have the gray beard now, right? All right. So with respect to systems, we're talking about playbooks, we're talking about an agile tech stack, and we're talking about methodology. So the key here is playbooks. We've talked about playbooks ad nauseum, right? Everyone should have a playbook at this point. What is a playbook? A playbook is the means by which a salesperson understands how to engage from cold through initial conversation, and then what steps they are taking inside of those conversations, right? What do I need to uncover? Some folks are using things like BANT or MEDIC, or maybe you've got a challenger sales process. That's a little more difficult to map to a playbook because it's a little more nuanced, but you have to have a sales team that clearly understands what the playbook is for each product and how we're engaging from the go-to-market, right, where we don't even know that they exist, to that initial conversation, moving them either through to disqualification or close. What is that playbook? You need to review it and make sure that it's still relevant. A lot of us have playbooks that we created back in, August 2020. Is it still relevant? Is anyone still using it? Do you know where it is? Is it sitting on Google Drive in a PDF? Probably not useful. If you're using a playbook at its optimal form, what should be happening is it should be in a dynamic state. A Google site is one way to create a dynamic state of a playbook where I'm getting bottoms-up feedback from my sellers who are saying, this messaging isn't working. This messaging is resonating with this persona. This persona has this concern. Here's where I get a case study. Here's how I navigate my demo in a way that's most effective, and it's not just cookie cutter for every person that I talk to. So go deep on playbooks here. Second piece, agile tech stack. This is not just the case for when we're experiencing budget cuts. We should be using technology at its optimum. What I mean by that is utilization should be high. If you've purchased something that has one or two people using it, or it was being used and now it's sitting on the shelf, we've got to have some kind of a format for review and ensuring that we are actually optimizing the utilization of all of our tech stack. The second piece here is ensuring that it still aligns with workflow. I can't tell you how often we go in to do a sales effectiveness assessment of an organization, and there's lots of great tech that's being used at about 5 to 7%. These are things that probably could be better done in a spreadsheet. We always say, do it in analog, pop it into a spreadsheet, nail the workflow, break the spreadsheet before you go looking for automation, before you go looking for ways in which you can optimize tech or investing in tech. That way, you're ensuring that you're actually going to get engagement with the tool. You'll have a high level of utilization, and you have a clear understanding of the impact that it's going to make in your sales role. Next piece there is methodology. There are two methodologies to keep in mind. Anyone who's heard me speak before knows that I'm a huge proponent, adamant proponent of having a sales methodology, because I don't see how you can possibly coach anybody without holding them accountable to something they've been trained to do. And that comes from sales methodology. Sales methodology also allows for common vernacular across the organization, allows for you to be able to hold people accountable and train people on the challenges that they're experiencing in their sales process. So if I'm having a challenge from discovery to demo, if I have a sales methodology, I can pick out that point challenge without boiling the ocean on just the theory of sales and be able to go back to my organization and help my team grow. That's critical. I beat that drum all the time. If you're curious about that more, ping me on LinkedIn. Happy to talk about it forever. The second piece here that's absolutely critical that most folks don't have is a coaching methodology. You can't just have a sales methodology, because you've got frontline managers who are completely responsible for ensuring that they're closing the gaps on individual performance. How do they close the gaps on individual performance if they're just left to their own devices to figure it out? Most of us, myself included, became sales managers because we were great salespeople, not because we were great at coaching. And most of us did not get a PhD in behavioral psychology from our organization that promoted us into the role, or even 6 months worth of training in how to close performance gaps. So this is absolutely critical, ensuring that you have folded in a coaching methodology that managers can adhere to, that allows them to have tribal knowledge share and allows you to ensure that you're able to impact your team individually. That rising tide floats all boats. All right. Any questions as we move to key questions that drive growth for this piece?
No questions so far.
Okay. So key questions driving growth. One piece is, how clearly defined is your sales process? The clear definition of sales process is very easy to evaluate. This is what we do. We go in and we listen to pipeline meetings. If in a pipeline meeting, you've got Hilmon saying, yeah, I was talking to Acme Company and I'd say they're, it's probably warm and you're probably high likelihood. I'd say we got a 60% probability of that closing. And then you go to Angelica and she's over there saying, well, yeah, I give them about 80% because they really like us. If you've got all this variable narrative in your pipeline review and not real explicit accuracy, where it's someone saying that based upon the exit criteria at the demo stage, I uncovered this, that, and the other. Therefore, I have moved them. Discovery stage. I've moved them to demo. In the demo, we're going to focus on these 3 pains that we uncovered. And I'm bringing in a resource from, I don't know, it could be professional services, could be a sales engineer, whoever it might be. And our goal coming out of that meeting is to understand this from them. And if you can't look both in your CRM and see this evidenced in your CRM, and if your pipeline meetings aren't sounding that consistent, then you have an opportunity there. And that opportunity is to ensure that you're overlying the sales process in a way that's going to be highly impactful for the entire team. And what this does is it cuts back on the fluff, it cuts back on the things that don't matter, and it also becomes a training environment for your sales team to create rigor with respect to how they talk about deals that are in the pipeline. Sales methodology, coaching methodology, I think we've talked about that before. Tech stack utilization, ensuring that it's where it should be, ensuring that whatever you bought is actually coming to pass in workflow, right? There are a lot of automation tools, myself included, that I've purchased that when I look at them in review 3 to 6 months later, they're not doing, it's probably not their fault. It's probably the fault of users, but I have to own the fact that either I don't have the resource, I don't have the expertise, or I don't have the desire or need to make this thing work anymore. Let's take a look at those things and ensure that our tech is working for us, not us working for our technology. And then finally, last piece with respect to systems is the concept of knowing your metrics. And you could call them KPI, you could call them OKRs, you could do something less formal than that. But in a sales leadership role, you've got to know 3 or less metrics that are driving your business. And those are the things you're going to focus on. Every tool has a dashboard now. Every tool comes with analytics and reporting, and it's fantastic until it's not. Because what happens is we've got so much information that it's hard to sift through what are vanity metrics. It's hard to sift through what are kind of things that are lagging indicators that don't really matter, but they make a really pretty dashboard. And what are the things that are driving my business? So being able to boil those things down so that you are just looking at those 3 dials. If you're in a plane, you know exactly what you need to be looking at, and that's it. Everything else is just glitter. Be sure that you understand what those things are and evaluate those and articulate them throughout the organization. And then what do you do once you understand them? You ensure that your sales team is performing to those things and those things only. And if you're able to distill those into less than 3 things, you get a team that is operating on all cylinders and is highly focused. And that goes a long way to not just creating a great enablement organization, goes a long way to ensuring that you're nailing your goals. How are we doing on questions, Angelica?
So far, so good. No questions.
So far, so good. All right.
Just a quick reminder, drop your questions in the chat if you have a question for Hilmon. We'll be stopping and pausing. If anyone has a question, we can ask it live.
Yeah, feel free. All right. And if you want to do that video thing, that's pretty cool. I'd love to see somebody hop on video. All right. So speaking of full utilization, let's use the full utilization of this tool that we've got here, right? All right, let's talk about staff. So staff can be a complex issue, right? Particularly right now. And I know folks are having some very difficult conversations with their team. I know that a lot of us, I'm hearing from a lot of sales leaders who have been tasked with truly understanding who stays, who goes, who are we architecting headcount for when we come into 2023? What are the teams going to look like? All of these pieces. And I want to say that I appreciate how difficult that is. And in doing so, some of the tools that are critical, and our next session on this is going to be all about hiring, onboarding, ramping, building teams, ongoing, that whole piece that's really critical to an organization. I look at our teams as being the biggest competitive differentiator that we've got. It's the biggest lever that we have are our human resources. And this is not just on the sales side. This is throughout the organization. And I'm probably stating the obvious. What's critical to ensure that they're showing up for you in this way where it is competitive differentiation is that you have clearly defined the roles that you need inside of your sales org. This means not just going to Indeed or going to LinkedIn and saying, okay, account executive technology company, taking somebody else's job description, finding and replacing their name and subbing that out. I know none of you have done this before, right? But just imagine if someone did this, right? You end up with something and you're going to kind of end up with the candidates that reflect the amount of effort that you put into it. That's the challenge. So in role definition, you've got to know what's specific for you. A salesperson at Yelp requires a completely different skill set than an enterprise salesperson at Salesforce. I just picked those 2 companies because they happen to be in my head, right? Very different skill set. Neither one is better or worse. They're just 2 different types of salespeople with 2 different types of sales motions, selling to 2 different types of industries and personas. So we can't just take cookie cutter things. We have to look at our own organization. The other piece with respect to that is when we look at competencies. What types of competencies are necessary? All AEs, all SDRs, all strategic account executives are not built the same. What do we need for our organization today? And please look 12 to 18 months out. I know sometimes we do just-in-time hiring and we're like, I need 10 SDRs this quarter. We go get SDRs. Keep in mind those SDRs are going to be looking for a career progression. They're going to be looking for their next step because they're human beings who want to perform and want to excel, right? So how do we do that? How do we ensure that we understand what competencies we need today? We call those already acquired, right? Acquired skills, acquired competencies. We aren't even interviewing people who have not already established this much clay, right? But we'll take that clay, we'll bring them into our organization, and then we actually have the ability to develop people. Those are the competencies that we can develop. Are you seeing where you get this competitive differentiation? The greater your ability to develop people, the less you need that to hire out of the gate, which means you can get a little salary arbitrage and hire people from different backgrounds and different experiences because you know once you bring them in, if they have this core material, you can turn them into that. That's a really powerful thing. It's also a really compelling value proposition when you're hiring people, saying, hey, we have a huge commitment to coaching, a huge commitment to professional development, and we have a process by which we're going to get you there, right? That aligns to this concept of retention planning. And retention planning is all about these days, you know, as you look at everyone from millennials to Gen Z to Gen Alpha that's getting into the workplace, you know, we're all inspired by growth and contribution, right? Contribution meaning what are we doing? What is the impact that we're having in our community, the community being the sales team. So retention planning needs to align to those things. We're going to talk about skills in just a second, but you have to have an eye towards each role and where they're going to be, what likelihood they have and opportunities that they have to grow inside of your organization, or else we shouldn't be hiring for it. The idea that lots of folks right now are quote unquote trimming the fat bothers me, because you shouldn't have fat in your sales organization. I understand sometimes economically we've got to cut back. That's a different language than saying we're cutting off the people who are superfluous. So let's not bring superfluous people into our organization. I don't think that's fair to the org. It's not fair to the individual. It's not fair to you. All right. Key questions to drive growth in this respect. Do you have the right people in the right roles for today? Today being key. I think it's capitalized there, right? This is really important, ensuring that we understand today versus yesterday versus tomorrow, right? For today and then growing into tomorrow is what we're looking for. Are you positioned to source these candidates effectively? And when we say like effectively and competitively, what we're looking for here is that piece I talked about being able to define those acquired skills, and then have you clearly archetyped how that person grows in your organization, whether it's through the coaching of a great manager, whether it's through shared subject matter expertise. I'll give you an example here. There's an organization in London that we work with that has deep subject matter expertise in their industry. And so they are able to go out and hire folks who are B2B SaaS sellers, bring them into their org and imbue them with almost like a PhD in subject matter expertise for their specific vertical. So that allows that person to have great expanse and growth in their career, learning a space that they have some passion and interest in. And that's what they hire for, the people who have interest and have demonstrated some affinity for the market segment that they're selling to. And how do you think those people show up in conversations with their prospects? It's awesome, right? Is onboarding serving the goals of the business? This is, I know it's a pretty obvious question. Most sales enablement firms and most sales leaders and most sales orgs spend a lot of time on this onboarding piece, right? Really key, though, to understand, are we just doing this fire hose thing? Drives me crazy when I hear people say, yeah, onboarding got people going through 2 weeks drinking from the fire hose. Well, I mean, I don't know if you've ever drank from a fire hose, but it's not, you'll still be thirsty. Let's just say that. At the end of the hosing, it's not effective. It's not efficient. It's not fair. It's junk. It's like, hey, Hilmon, sit down and watch this video from our founder for the last 45 minutes that was recorded 2 years ago and in all hands through somebody's iPhone in the back of it. I mean, come on, let's get real. So how do you create an onboarding experience that's effective? You figure out what does somebody got to do in the first 30 days and only give them that, right? We were able to actually significantly move the needle for an organization that has a quick path to demo because everybody's curious about it. I know, very fortunate, right? Their whole market segment, super curious people, really want to see a demo. So all we needed to do was train that salesperson on how to demo effectively, because this top of funnel stuff wasn't that critical. They just needed to know how to demo and how to speak to the job to be done for this specific ICP. We started with that in onboarding rather than starting with the mission, the values of the organization. I know those things are important, but they weren't going to move the needle on someone getting up to speed in 30 days. This also helped them shorten their sales cycle significantly. I want to say it was 31 to 33%, something like that. So take a look at that and turn it upside down and do just-in-time onboarding, the things that someone's going to need immediately. Last pace, I think I've said this enough, is just ensuring that you've got career paths for everybody, that everybody's got a promotion path, that it's been clearly articulated. Don't have mutual mystification where you're just sitting there wondering, when's Hilmon going to come in and ask for that promotion that I haven't even figured out how I'm going to architect it ahead of time so that everyone's benchmarked and moving toward it. Doesn't mean you have to promise it. Doesn't mean you have to say after 3 months you're going to be moving into this. Just say this is the trajectory. It's wholly dependent upon these three things. 1 are market factors. 2 is our growth. 3 is your ability to impact these specific measures, these specific metrics. Sorry. Ensuring that you've got those things nailed is going to be really important. All right. Last couple of pieces coming up, unless we have a question.
We do. We have a question in the chat, but we're dialing it back to the systems portion of it.
Okay.
What is your preferred sales methodologies?
Really? Is this someone from my team asking the question?
It is Alicia.
Thanks, Alicia. So this is a book Corey and I wrote. It's called Triangle Selling. Here's I love triangle selling. It's probably the most modern sales methodology that has been created since we wrote the book about 4 years ago. Let me say this, though, in all honesty, and if you want the book, just ping me. If anybody wants the book, ping me either through Angelica or on LinkedIn. I'm happy to send you a copy to check out. If you do not have a sales methodology, if you have a sales methodology that has gaps If you're doing something that's like, yeah, but sometimes they just don't know how to do some of the soft skills, or they're not really good at uncovering pain, or how do I hold people accountable to what they're doing in demos? We don't have a demo framework. It's all in this book. And that's why it was written. But here's the deal. I will tell you this honestly. And I think somebody asked me this in the coaching conversation, and my answer is always the same. Any sales methodology will be impactful if you apply it with rigor. If you train it completely, if your entire management team is bought off on it, if they understand how to coach to it, and if it's rigorously applied and folks are held accountable to using it in a CRM, they can all work effectively. I've seen them all be successful. That's the short answer. If you want a deeper answer, then like I said, ping me. I'm happy to wax philosophically on sales training all day long.
Yep. And I dropped the link to your book, Triangle Selling, and I also dropped your LinkedIn as well for folks to connect with you directly. And feel free to connect with us on MSP as well. We'll do a key takeaways and wrap up. Feel free to send us a note if you want Hilmon's book.
Such an awesome producer. Thank you. Was there another question?
Nope, we can continue.
Okay, so we're doing the strategy, system, staff, and skills. So this ties to your question, Alicia, the understanding of skills. So training, we've said it's important. I could beat that drum all day long. What's really important is that you own it. And what I mean by that is training I came from a background from a training organization. And part of that training organization's philosophy is that reinforcement is important. And it is, because you don't learn training on day one. You don't get this ad hoc, somebody comes in, does a 8-hour training with you, and you walk away and now you're a genius or a master at that specific domain. It doesn't happen that way. There's a learning loss model that most of you are familiar with, that after training, after a certain number of days, it goes away until you get to about the 90th day, you've retained about 3% of what you learned. So how do you turn that around? Well, we live in a day and time where there's this great convergence of technology. You've got asynchronous, you've got virtual, you've got learning management systems. We're working with organizations right now to take something like a learning management system, and don't see this as overblown. I'm not saying you got to go, spend thousands of dollars on a learning management system, but this could be something that's really small. It could be something that you're borrowing from HR. It could be something that's very large and has a lot of rigor to it. You can do this in different ways. And again, you start with the things that your team needs today, not just the soup to nuts. Let's go sales training 101 to sales training 601 and build this whole thing out. No one's ever going to use that, right? But you need to own it. And by that, I mean, you need to be able to own the delivery. There needs to be someone on your team who can deliver competently, maybe not at the expert level, but can deliver reinforced training, can deliver just-in-time training for things like demos, things like discovery, things like for uncovering pain, things like for SDRs on posture and even just how to write effective emails and leveraging social and making cold calls, all of these sorts of things. If you continue to outsource these things entirely, then you are creating a crutch for your organization. And you're creating this episodic training environment where if you're going to effectively leverage this opportunity that you have to use your team to competitive advantage, you have to have a commitment to ongoing learning and development. And it starts with owning your own training. A second piece there, I've talked about this before, is coaching development. You really have to you really have to develop the coaches in your team into being impactful. You create a culture of coaching. If you're in leadership, the conversation becomes, how are you coaching Angelica? How are you coaching Hilmon? What are the opportunities that you've identified for the team? What are the common denominators across the team that you're coaching to impact these specific metrics that we're trying to drive strategically for our organization? Creating that conversation and then teaching managers on how to do that. I can't tell you the impact that I've seen in organizations that do this implicitly. The last piece here is leveraging managers, right? Understanding that the manager is the fulcrum. A lot of what a manager does is in a black box. And I don't mean that in a way where they need a greater level of scrutiny or oversight. What I mean is that there's an opportunity there for manager reward, for saying to managers, hey, you're impacting the team significantly in this way beyond just the metrics and beyond the fact that you just hit the number, but you're doing these things between the lines, like having conversations. You're actually exposing the team to greater opportunities to understand business acumen relative to the folks that we're trying to meet. All of these pieces of frontline management need to get a little more sunlight and a little more integration. And when I say integration, I mean tribal knowledge, right? If you have a number of frontline managers, they should be sharing with each other their coaching playbooks. They should be sharing with each other the challenges that they are trying to overcome for each of their team and why those are critical to the overall goals of the organization. And again, how do they boil down to that systemic piece of those 3 things that you're trying to drive. So you'll see here, a lot of the skills development has to do with the organization owning skills training and understanding the skills necessary to get somebody from this role to their next progressive role. And then how do we invest in managers? Because that's your one-to-many. People go to work for people, right? People show up for your managers. Managers are key to retention. They're key to performance. They're key to the motivation and morale of the organization. And we need to see a greater investment in that manager level. So what are some questions to ask yourself? Questions on this front are ensuring that once you've trained, you're validating that training. It's not enough to just train and understand and remember what was trained. I know tons of great salespeople who have tons of knowledge, right? It's not about knowledge. There's knowledge all over LinkedIn. Half of what salespeople are doing is going out and trying to find the next tip or trick. There's plenty of knowledge. What's more critical is crossing that knowing-doing gap, right? There are the things we know, and then there are the things that we do. And we don't always do what we know. What your role in leadership is to do is to understand and validate that, wow, okay, Hilmon and Angelica have been trained on this thing. Now, how is it showing up in workflow? Is it actually showing up in practice? If it's not, how do I close that gap? Here's a coaching opportunity to ensure that it does, right? Is coaching a competitive advantage, or is this a gaping hole with respect to your team? If you look around at your managers, do you have good coaches? If you don't, you got a great opportunity there to invest in them and to give them a coaching methodology that's going to help them to be successful. And just ensuring that you understand what I just said earlier around training and supporting and equipping your managers. That equipment could be training, that equipment could be tech. You know, there are management platforms. Coach CRM is built as a platform for managers to be able to effectively impact performance. Typical CRMs, sales CRMs, the places where you track things like your deals, those are actually tools for the IC. And those are tools for operations and finance, right? And we're just in the middle in that leadership role, having to figure out what's happening there and report on it, right? You've got things like call analytics tools or call recording tools. That's an IC tool. That's not a platform for managers. You need to have platforms that equip your managers to be able to leverage that one-to-many opportunity that they have inside of your organization. And then finally, this sounds obvious, but are the skills you're training your team on, are they aligned to the strategic goals? I was working with an organization recently that was training their team on a motion that was like a high velocity, top of funnel demand gen motion, really broad-based type of a thing, because that's what they were doing 9 months ago. However, management had pivoted, trying to move upstream because that's where they realized they had the greatest opportunity, to an account-based selling and an account-based marketing model, which had nothing to do with what the salespeople were still doing for activity every day. So this is just taking these things instead of in silos and being able to put them on a wall. Sometimes people get out their sticky notes and they pop these things on the wall under the categories of strategy, system, staff, and skills. Looks something like this slide here. And being able to review those things and create alignments. I look at this sometimes. I'm a very visual person. I don't know if you've ever seen one of the cop shows where they're like tracking down the murder or whatever, and they've got like the photos on the wall and they've got red lines and pins going to everyone. Like, do that. It's kind of fun, but a little macabre, but kind of fun to be able to map and see where you've got some opportunities, because chances are you got 75, 80% of this stuff locked in. Right? If you don't, then you've got great opportunity. But if you get to 80%, then figuring out that 20% and aligning on that as a management team, articulating that to your sales team, and then going forward with, this is our goal for 90 days. Remember, this is not boiling the ocean. Let's knock this thing out in 90 days. You'll see a seismic shift in the impact of your organization. Angelica, questions? We're almost at time.
Yeah, we have a question in the chat by Yogi. What rep competencies truly matter, and how do you connect it to outcomes?
Okay, so this is wholly dependent upon your organization. I'll tell you some that I look at, right? I look at posture as a competency, right? First, are we talking developed competencies? Or are we talking acquired competencies or developing competencies? Let's just pretend. I'll pretend that answer. And if you want to ping me or keep typing as I'm talking, then go for it. I would say that let's take acquired competencies. I think that a rep needs to demonstrate curiosity, right? They have to be curious. If someone is in a demand gen role, they need to be a good sourcer. People don't tell SDRs that you're going to spend the majority of your life doing some level of research, or maybe you're in an organization that doesn't have to do that. But if research is part of the job, then we got to vet for it, right? If they're going to be getting on cold calls, what is their level of comfort and posture and their ability to navigate active listening and to manage a conversation at a high level, at a peer level with someone who may not be their peer? What is their posture with respect to those things? But these are the things that you can just distill in your own organization by looking at, if you're not in a startup and you're the first salesperson, look at the people who are successful and pattern match. I'm not saying you want to hire a homogenous organization. They don't have to look alike. They don't have to be from the same schools. They don't have to be the same age. But there are things that will be indicators of what makes for a successful rep. The last piece here that I'll tell you is really important with respect to competencies is what you're capable of as an individual. There are things that as an individual, I've been training sales teams for over 18 years. There are things I hate training sales teams on. I just don't like it. So I know someone in my company is not going to get that from me. So I'm going to see if they've got it already from someone else first. And then there are places that I know where I can add developing competencies to ensure that they've got, that they're still growing in the organization in a way that I'm shaping and in a way that speaks to my expertise.
Awesome. Thank you. Any more questions
Welcome.
in the chat?
We almost went right to the tape.
Yeah. All right. Well, it looks like it looks like there's no questions in the chat. Again, we do still have time. If you do want to connect with Hilmon, please connect with him on LinkedIn. I've sent the Twitter and LinkedIn handles in the chat. Also,
Not my TikTok.
I definitely add your TikTok. Are you TikToking? Are you doing little dances with your
I am
diagrams
TikToking.
and your visuals?
I'm not dancing yet, but how about this? If I get 2 times the number of followers I have now, which is not that many, maybe I'll do a little dance.
I feel like you'll be viral. You go viral in seconds.
Yeah, right.
Well, thank you everyone for joining. We do have another event with Hilmon in part of the 4-part series. Everyone who registered for this event will be automatically added, but if you do have friends or colleagues that you think would benefit this event, I'm going to drop the RSVP link for our November 21. Hilmon did talk about playbooks a little bit in this presentation, but we're going to dive deeper in sales playbooks that actually drive revenue. It's going to be an amazing event, as is all of his events. So please definitely register and send it to all your friends. If you missed his first one, we'll also send the previous webinar in the wrap-up event email today, along with the sales enablement playbook that Hilmon and Corey Bray wrote. So we'll send all those goodies to you after the event. That will be on the MSP website, as well as the presentation and the recording. And Hilmon, thank you so much again for your time. It has been an amazing pleasure, and it's always been fun being on stage with you. You always keep it lively and fun and engaging.
With your help, I appreciate it. Thanks, Angelica. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you joining.
Have a great Monday, everyone. Thank you.